Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for receiving me here. Very happy to be back at ECCO and doing seminars. I've done 2 before, one in 2008 and one in 2011. And the one in 2005, or 2004 and 2005, was about epistemology and ontology. And so I started off there, and then I had one in 2011 about governance. And now, today, 2014, spring 2014, I will talk about memes, as it says, as mental frames and cognitive templates, and I will explain what I mean by these expressions. I also have a subtitle there called Design for Desired Emergence, which is maybe a paradox. Is it possible at all to design for emergence, or is emergence not about design, and is design not about the emergence? Is it possible to blend these two? I will go into that question as well. I met Professor Francis Heilig in 2005, 2004, and we had a meeting here over at the ECCO offices at Glea. And what has always fascinated me as a social scientist is the gap between the theoretical strategies or theoretical work and the complexity of operational reality. So when I came to ECCO, I met a man who were kind of embracing both the theoretical realms, but also the practical operational stuff. And I hadn't met too many academics that did exactly that. So I were very fascinated, and I've had a conversation going on since that. I am a social scientist, as mentioned, but in 2003 I established a company called Memento, or it was called Memetics with an X first, then I changed name because you can't call a company mathematics. I mean, Memetics is a scientific discipline, and to have a company with the same name, I didn't think that's right, so I changed the name to Memento. What we are doing is related to what I started with, the gap between theory and practice. There's a lot of gaps between theoretical strategies in different organizations around the world and the operational practice different practitioners experience. So what this company does is it reduces the gap between theory and strategy. Let the strategy, which is very often formed in PowerPoints and in Word documents, make that really influence what is going on different areas within different organizations. We work for both commercial companies and public companies, and also for the third sector, Norwegian people, for instance. We are a small global company. We are located in Oslo and here in Brussels, and also in Singapore. The red dots, that's where we have offices. We're also having a formal company registered in London, but we are not operating from there. And we are now planning to expand, so the next red dot will be Berlin this autumn. The blue dots here are where we are doing our work. We've been to Africa, doing a lot of stuff, Southeast Asia, but mainly are we operating in Europe and India as well. What has taken us around the world has been our clients. We have, on the concept we're working on, we have had a turnover of approximately 10 million euros so far, and it's all based on a memetic approach to consultancy, so to say. The ideals and principles for my work, both the scientific one and the practical one, is to be as simple as possible, but not simpler, as said before. And I'm very inspired by the ECCO work, because I think a lot of work within complexity, evolution, and cognition is quite complex. The writings are not very easy to access, but when it comes to the papers that are produced in ECCO, I find them they are scoring according to all these three criteria as I see it. They are very simplistic, but as I see it, in the way they are produced, they are essential, and they are quite clear. My philosophic and scientific point of departure is this question: how? The how part is what's really it's really interesting. How is it possible to design for a desired emergence within and between active human agents in social systems? What I will do now for the next 30 minutes is to go through this question. What do I mean by these expressions? What is a social system? It's a big question. What is an active human agent? What kind of attributes do active human agents have? Why don't I just talk about people and persons? Well, as many of you know, to use these terms is positioning me into an academic field, and that's the academic field of ECCO. So these names are familiar to most of you. When I read them about the dangerous idea, Darwin's dangerous idea, in long time ago, I was, as most people, thinking about this his theory related to biological systems. To talk about Darwin in social system connotates a lot of bad stuff to a lot of academics, and for sure that's if you look at Herbert Spencer, who started to use Darwin in social systems in the Victorian era. It was, in today's perspective, terrible stuff that he wrote in many ways. His perspective on human beings was not based on humanism as we what we appreciate today. And he was followed by the fascist movement in Italy and the Nazi movement in Germany, and they all built on Darwin. So in Norwegian academic circles, to talk about Darwin and in relationship to social systems were kind of taboo for many, many years. So when I'm talking about Darwin, a lot of people start to think about survival of the fittest, which is not a Darwin expression, it's actually a Herbert Spencer expression. So it's in from a Norwegian point of view, there are not too many social scientists that goes into evolution. But if you looked at Torsten Veblen or Schumpeter, these economic guys, the economist people, they were not building on the human perspective that were a part of Herbert Spencer's work. And when you look to Campbell and Ulrich, McKelvey and Heilig, then the evolutionary approach to social systems is something totally different than the case was in the early days. Complexity, familiar names there as well. Ashby, Herbert Simon, Prigozhin and Stengers, all names that are referred to in the ECCO sphere and that I build my work on as well. When it comes to cognition, a lot of the contributors here are also contributing into the evolution and complexity field, and they blend through ECCO and a lot of the work that is done here. What I have in addition is American pragmatism. I'm fascinated by the American pragmatists. Here I'm mentioning Sanders, Peirce, James, Mead, and Dewey, and Rorty. I will come back to how pragmatism influences our practical work in Memento and in my PhD as well. So, active human agents. Complex stuff, people, especially in organizations and social systems. How do they behave? How do they think? I build on the action ontology as the rest of people working in ECCO do. But at the same time, there are, I will come back to that later on, how the action ontology is influencing this work. Active human agents are individual human beings in social system, and they are reflexive. They are more or less self-conscious and conscious of the effects they make. They are free to a certain extent. Big question, if they are free, are human agents free? They are goal-directed, and they maximize utility, benefit, and our fitness. I have this from Francis Heilig and his writing in 2009. It's possible to I will go into this utility thing and also this thing related to fitness and adaptation. Is agents, human agents in social system, always doing one of these three, or are there more stuff that you can relate to people in an organization when they work together? They act in their environment according to certain rules, and these rules are a function of their goals and their knowledge. I find that statement interesting as well. I look forward to discuss that afterwards. If you go into Herbert Simon's work from 1957, he talks about bounded rationality. And bounded rationality is, from his point of view, the fact that people have cognitive limitations, biologically, but also socially. We cannot foresee all the global effects of our actions, and we apply our rationality to what we perceive is the choices available to us. So there are always more choices available for a human being in an organization, but we as individuals work on the choices that are available to us. There's writing from Kahneman, the psychologist, economist, that is also with building on this perspective. When we do strategy in action, that includes coordination and steering of individuals or people. Steering and coordination is very often labeled as governance. So when we go into a social system, we work with governance. The agents have intents, and this is from the action ontology again. They have intents for their actions. They are local and individual at one time, but at the same time they might be global on behalf of the social system they belong to. So when these two things are playing along to maximize or optimize their individual benefit or fitness, and at the same time they have collective intentions of optimizing the collective, the social system, then the dynamics that are created becomes quite complex. And in most systems, there are a balance between the power that is distributed among the agents and the centralized, more formal power that are typical for hierarchies in organizations. So when I talk about social systems, I talk about hierarchies, but also networks and markets for that sake. Adaptation and change. When we go approach a social system, we come from the outside and we are doing stuff with that system as consultants. Individuals adapt to other individuals, but they also change other individuals. And there's a dynamic, a kind of lead and follow dynamics in every relationship when it comes to how agents behave towards each other. Sometimes you can choose as a free agent to follow a leader, formal, informal leader, or you can choose not to. And these dynamics, when it comes to following and leading, which is a Taoistic principle, is actually taking place a lot when it comes to adaptation and change, social dynamics in social systems. A social system, interaction of at least two agents, and at the same time the globe is a social system, so everything in between there. More or less formalized. What constitutes a social system has been answered within the social sciences for years. Pat Parsons says it's about actions. Niklas Luhmann talk about communication. And if you go into the work of what's his name again? Communicative action. Habermas, Jürgen Habermas. Then he tries to do stuff. But I find it quite difficult to understand these guys. I've been reading at least both Lumen and Hovermaster, and I find it quite difficult to really go into what they are meaning. They are not standing in a complexity kind of. Their point of departure is not complexity. Maybe Lumen is that, but when it comes to Habermas, I find him very, very difficult to understand dealing with these questions. So, to treat a social system as a complex, adaptive system that organizes and makes solutions for a lot of mind-boggling stuff I've been working with lately. And again, referring Heilig again, the structures tend to be fuzzy. Each individual agent might have his or her own perspective of what is a social system. And that is true in practical reality as well. When we go into a company or an organization that is distributed all around the world, we find that their perspective, the way they make sense of their own organization, their own work, is very differentiated and not the same at all. So to distinguish different components, relationships and stuff is actually taking place in the practical world all the time, and it's not one organization. It's definitely very often a formal organization with its hierarchy and it's very ordered, but when you go into the organism, the interaction among peoples, the complexity starts, and the definition of what is a social system and what kind of social system am I a part of starts to work. The most simple way to is if you belong to us, immediately a them is created. And I think that when the agents themselves say, this is us, we are here in Rio de Janeiro and we've been here working for a long time, or we are the guys in Berlin and we are working for a long time, or we are the guys in marketing and we are together and we are the marketing people, then the others become clear immediately. So the us and them from each agent is an important way for us to find out what kind of social system exists within the formal organization when we work with larger companies. Well, to design for, to have an intent, which is essential for the action ontology as well. There's an intention going on, and to design in this perspective is to have a purpose with what changes you want to happen in an organization. As I initially said, desired emergence might be a paradox. To desire is to want something, and emergence is quite complicated stuff. When each individual starts in a social system to go after his or her goals, using different strategies to make his or her goals come true, then the dynamics that starts become very complex. And in social system, emergence is taking place along a timeline when these individual strategies are sought to be brought into action. So this model, very simple. If you have 100% emergence, then you have no design. And if you have 100% design, then you have no emergence. That's my statement. Because I think if you are treating people with a too strong intentional design intention, which a lot of people do in management around the world, they think, not all, but a lot of people have that model because they come from an academic tradition that has influenced them to think that there is possible to design a whole lot. Too much design kills organizations, from my point of view, but so do too much emergence. So to balance these two in a management perspective or in a development perspective is quite important. Within and between. Well, within agents means human beings. When we work with our memes, as I will come back to, we work with human beings, individuals. But when we are inserting our memes, which I will come back to, they also start to spread within social groups, in collectives, social systems. We very often think about Blackbox and Whitebox when we're working with different social systems. A Blackbox, as you know, is a system where you just view the input and the output, and you have some ideas about the transfer characteristics, but you don't know exactly about the internal workings of that system. So behaviorism in psychology, for instance, is a position that can be put there as well. Then we have Whitebox, where you go in and you look at the system and you really look at the subparts and the internal workings. and you can access it, and you can understand it. Yes, please.
Are they also green boxes?
Of course, again, well, yeah, maybe.
White and black, and
Yeah.
between?
In between, partly open and partly closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, for instance, what do you think about? What do you think about it?
Me?
Yeah.
I am.
And you are, yeah, you are.
Yes.
I understand. So we are partly open, and this is just perspectives as it is. I mean, this is a kind of epistemology. This is a way of making sense of the world. So I guess this is not either or, it's continuance, definitely. I totally agree with that. Okay, the whole part. Well, we treat individuals as black boxes. That means that we are saying what's happening on the inside of you. We are kind of behaviorists in working with people. But we treat social systems as white boxes. We go in and look at the dynamics in the social system and really try to understand what kind of formal and informal dynamics are going on within organizations, social systems. And we use means. We use them as forms and cognitive templates. I will go into what I mean by saying that. And also by what interpretation means. So, as you know, memes can be regarded as sustainable information units. They are sustainable in the sense that they survive in a system. Then they are sustainable. They are information units. And they can be regarded as signs and objects. Signs and objects is pragmatism, I would say. It's about semiotics and how we look at the different types of memes. A meme is out there, it's a sign. When it's something observable out there. A meme in here, in the brain, is an object, according to pragmatists, broadly speaking. And they spread successfully. So they are naturally selected and adapted by active human agents based on competition. And I remember 2-3 years ago I spoke to Francis about, is it possible that memes that don't have a brain can compete? And again, back to the action ontology, intent. Does a meme by itself have an intent? This is a discussion that is going on within memetics. One of my first lectures at the ECCO seminars was criticizing memetics a whole lot because I think it's a science that hasn't grown. My PhD is about memetics, but still, I think it's a lot of challenges related to that discipline. Well, the fittest and best adapted memes will have a better diffusion than the ones that do not fit into the social system they are competing within. And as you know, memetics, an approach to perception, to thought, to communication, or in an action ontology perspective, to action, and to action. And every one of the three there are actions. Communication is action, thought is action, and perception is action. Derived from evolution and complexity, using the same research program as genetics, studying social diffusion and adaptation of signs and objects among active human beings. And this is the basis for what we do. Using the same research program as genetics, studying social diffusion and adaptation of signs and objects among active human agents. Okay. The Memento memes, I will go into that now, the how part very soon. But I treat memes as tools, as active tools that can take you from where you are to where you want to go. So active tools that can take you away from where you are to where you want to go. They are also mental frames and forms and cognitive templates. They form and process agents' actions, agents' content as well. 123 memes are created for taking individual and collective strategies into action. This is an example of the memes we have. And I also collected them in this fan. And they are influenced by Iconology, which is a discipline not very well known. Icons, studying icons, the diffusion of the religions in the world. used icons to just because they don't have had the possibility to write, so they took icons among them and they traveled out and started to talk about different gospels they had. So iconology is quite interesting in a mimetic perspective as well, to use very simple frames, forms, to process individual thoughts, content, so to say. These memes are individual and collectively applicable. That means a lot of sociology and strategy models are not in here because they are only applicable on collective systems. And a lot of psychology models are not here either because they are only applicable on individuals, persons. But there is a blend between models that can be both used on individual systems and on collective systems. They are like Lego bricks. They can be connected to each other. So when you start to work with them, you can connect them and create more complex models. They are complementary. They explain different aspects of working together, being together in a social system. And they might also reinforce each other. So working with one model is one thing, but when you start to combine these with two other models, then you get a reinforcement in the sense making. They are generic in the sense that they can be applied to a lot of different systems, a lot of different contexts. They are replicable, made to stick. One of the books I read a few years ago is an airport book sold on in the kiosk on the airports, called Made to Stick. I don't remember who wrote it, but it's a very simple book, and it's about how do you make things stick. A lot of people come in with extended memories like this, but I think it's sometimes wise in leadership and in strategy and in mobilization of people to just carry it as a meme inside. And I have used a lot of the strategies from Made to Stick to make these as simple as possible, but not simpler. To make them as essential as possible, not too essential, and also to create this as clear as possible. So they are accessible if you are an academic, but they are also accessible if you're not have an academic background. Okay. So what we do. This is a long slide, but what we do, we just infuse these to different social systems. We define what is a social system based on conversation with people within a company or an organization. And then we start to work with these forms as mental templates, as facilitators. So we facilitate processes where people start to do interpretations of these models together. And through these models, they come with their content, and they blend their content with the forms, with the templates, and suddenly emergent effects starts to happen in a sense-making perspective. We very often take this model as a starting point. Where are you now? And where do you want to be? Which state are you in now? And which state do you want to be in? And what do you need to do together to get from where you are to where you want to be? It is very naive and simple. But the context which these people are in is so complex that to come in with simplified frames and mental models is actually sorting out a whole bunch, because there's so much content and so much words and so much perspectives, so many perspectives. So to come in with this simple meme is a starting point. We go first identify areas that require strategic or operative improvement. So what we do is we go in to the social system, labeled terrain here, and we just start to talk to people that are up in the hierarchy, that are directors, or low in the hierarchy, labeled something else. So they are representative when it comes to hierarchy. We just have 10 to 20 conversations with people that are positioned on different levels of the hierarchy. We also use the specialization. Do you work with marketing, or do you work with production, or do you work with whatever, accounting? And then we interview along the specialization as well. So we have both representations when it comes to the ones that are focusing on the general and the ones that are focusing on the specific, the hierarchy. But also when it comes to different forms of specialization, accounting, marketing, production, you name it. And then we have one conversation with this person sitting here, quite high up in the hierarchy, and we have a conversation with this person here. And the position they have in the organizational terrain is so different that the way they look at the tasks at hand, the present situation and the desired situation is totally different. It's why it's amazing how people make sense because of their knowledge and because of their goals, because of what they are focusing on. When we have 10 conversations and we have different representations of the world, how do they look at the terrain? What kind of mental maps do they actually have when they are looking at the tasks at hand, their own organization and the market they're working in? Based on these interviews, which are qualitative, we do very often a quantitative approach, and we come up with different statements based on these interviews that are extremely positive. In our organization, everyone understands the strategy, which is never true. But that's a statement, because this person say, I don't know that we have a strategy. And this person say, well, we had a strategy, but we're not following it. And then we come up with a positive statement. We are all understanding the strategy. And then we say, okay, how is it now when we come to the present situation on a scale from 1 to 5? And how is the desired situation on a scale from 1 to 5? And then we do a gap analysis, and then we show the gap analysis to the whole universe in the system, and they say, this is not us, we're just facilitating this. This is you talking about you talking about the others, and this is your perspectives, this is your maps of the world. These are the gaps in this system, and then we start our facilitative programs. And then we insert these memes in different ways. What we do is we take a program, and that program can be a program for a merger or an acquisition, or to get the strategy work better, or to turn around from avoiding bankruptcy, or whatever. That program lasts for 6 months, 3 months, 2 days, depending on. The themes in these programs are taken from the different areas that has come through or have been coming up to the surface through these interviews and through this quantitative approach where we're interviewing the whole universe. So we group different exclamation marks together and call them themes. And then we tailor themes in workshops, different themes that are coming from the organization, and we use these as mental forms and templates in making people think and talk together about tasks at hand and where they are and where they want to be. And the outputs from these workshops is documents that we are doing, what are we going to do together. The output is coordination, it's rejuvenation, it's inspiration, it's a lot of stuff, just to do stuff together in an organization later on. What we do is we always focus on making people do interpretations. We never come in and say, do this or do that. We don't have a norm as external facilitator. We just say, okay, what's your point of view? How do you make sense of the world? How do you make interpretation, both of your tasks at hand, your reality, but also when you blend it with the stuff we come with, the memes. Interpretation. We describe the memes as with pen, always, because we are carrying it with us inside. So we improvise and we come up with a meme that is the right meme to come up with, but we do some planning as well according to this model. We plan a program, take the themes, we choose some memes, but very often the dynamics in the room is that the plan doesn't work, so you have to do something else and then you have to improvise. And then we're into more emergent matter, more than design plan matter. Never going in and saying how things should be, That's not our job. That's the job for the whole system. They are normative. They are allowed to be normative. But we are not. We just come in with models, icons that can be interpreted. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but again, memes are forms. We do some processes. They come in with their content. So our focus is on these two. Process and form, that's what we're doing, and the content is coming from the organization. Okay, last slide. So the core of my work, and that is both the academic work and the practical work in Memento, is to do governance, to really steer and coordinate people from the outside by blending design and emergence. We let active human agents do interpretations of predefined means, and we facilitate these processes. And that influences how they perceive and process themselves and others, the social systems they are a part of, formal, informal, and also the markets or the context where these social systems operate. And this in turn impacts how they act when they leave the room after we have been working with different programs for a while, different teams. It has influence on how they act together, both individually and collectively. We always check return on investments. So we always check the effects of what we're doing when we are coming out from the outside, infusing these memes. We always ask the same questions 2 years later or 1 year later to check out, has anything happened according to how you regard your own reality and how you regard the tasks at hand and what the organization is doing. So that concludes what I was intending to say initially. I look forward to questions and discussions from all of you. Thank you.